Just a quick video showing how it's imperative to use either continuous welding, preferably, or use seam sealant, some sort of joint sealant for suitable for steel, such as polyurethane. If you're not sure, you can watch the video I did on automotive sealants. So what happens is, as you can see here, I've done it, and this is called spot welding. So basically we've got one weld every per section instead of having it continuously welded. This here is continuous welding here. So it's just all the way, there's no joints. This is by far, of course, the best. But it does take a lot of time and resources. So what the factory does, and what I do sometimes, although I don't really like doing it, is this. The tensile strength of the welds are 70,000 psi. So this here, these spot welds, if done properly, they're more than enough strength. They've got more than enough force to hold everything together. Now the problem is you're left with gaps, right? You're left with seams, joints that, if not covered, the water will get in behind it. I'm holding the phone charger. Water will get in behind it, and then the unthinkable will happen: rust. So always try to keep the joints as closed as possible, as close together, so there's very, very little gap right there. Now what happens is the factory doesn't continuously weld the body. So contrary to popular belief, you buy a car or truck and you look at it and you think it's one piece. It's not. So right here you can see this whole seam here. This is factory, this is original. And the factory uses this sort of, this is not weld, this is some sort of sealant here, right? And you can actually see the dimples here where the spots were welded. So again, it's just spot weld. It's a lot cheaper and faster for the factory. The problem is, as you can see up there, there's a huge gap right there. All around and at the top. Well, you might not be able to see it really well. There, you can really see it there. That's a huge gap right there. And the problem is that just over time, they actually just did one spot weld right there. Looks like another one there. One there, which is not nearly enough. And again, what happens here is water will get in behind here, it'll flow downward, and then rot out here, which is exactly what happened. The sides, they don't matter too much because water always tends to get from the top, right? But it's not too bad here. But that's why you need to use, you need to have good welds, especially on the corners. I always like to do continuous welds, at least in the corners. So you'll notice here in the corners that I did a good section here, because corners and edges are, especially the corners, there where the steel starts to come apart, which is what happened there. It starts to warp outwards. Now in this case here, they didn't even bother putting any sealant. Same there. Which again, you know, if you're one of those people that think that the factory does everything thinking of your benefit, even back then it wasn't like that. Completely. Much more though, but not completely, as you can see there. So I am gonna do a continuous weld, at least on these edges here. Use the hammer to close this gap, and then have sealant going around all the seams, all the joints. So all around here. You can see I did a bit of a seam there, continuous weld there, and there. I'd like to probably do one more there and there, and then at the ends always. it would be a lot nicer to have the whole thing just continuously welded, but we're short on time, and this here will be more than enough. So this sealant, for example, this is a truck. This truck was made in 1986, and this sealant here, as you can see, it cracked off a bit there on that big spot, on that high spot, but the original sealant is still there, and it's intact. It's pretty strong still. But again, they don't like corners, because this stuff over time, it seems like it gets brittle, and then if the steel is stronger than this, the steel is stronger than the sealant, so it'll break it apart. Hopefully the sealant that I'm using, it stays flexible. But again, always corners, always get them welded. And the other problem is here, what happens to is the heat from the welds, it also warps the side of the sheet outwards too, if it's thin. It's this stuff and it won't warp at all, but so yeah, again, that's why you need to use sealant on joints. If you want it to last, either continuous welding and sealant, or if you don't have time or the resources for continuous welds, then at least have sealant. But on the corners, it's pretty vital to have continuous welds, at least more spot welds. 3, especially in the middle, that's not nearly enough. They should have put one here and one there, and that's the reason why.